The private investigator's folder hit the mahogany desk with a heavy thud. David Sterling stared at the black and white photos scattered across the polished surface, his hands shaking as he picked up each one. There she was, his ex-wife Amara, but she looked nothing like the woman who had walked out of his life a year ago. In one photo, she was laughing with a group of children at what looked like a school playground. In another, she was painting a mural on a brick wall, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. The woman in these pictures glowed with happiness, something he had never seen during their 3 years of marriage. "She's been living in Portland, Oregon," the investigator said, his voice cutting through David's thoughts. "Works as an art teacher at a community center. Goes by her maiden name now, Amara Johnson. She seems content." Content. The word hit David like a punch to the stomach. How could she be content without him? How could she look so alive, so free when he felt like he was dying inside? For the past 12 months, David had convinced himself that Amara would come back, that she would realize her mistake and return to their penthouse apartment, to their life of luxury and privilege. He had kept her things exactly where she left them. Her favorite coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet. Her books remained on the nightstand. Even her toothbrush was still in the bathroom holder. But these photos told a different story. They showed a woman who had built a new life, one that apparently didn't include him at all. David picked up another photo. This one showed Amara at a local coffee shop, sitting across from an older black woman who looked like she could be her mother. They were both smiling, their heads bent together as if sharing a secret. The sight made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. "What else?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The investigator flipped open a notebook. "She lives in a small apartment above a bookstore. Rides her bike to work every day. Volunteers at the local animal shelter on weekends. She's made friends. Real friends. People who care about her." Each word was like a knife twisting in David's heart. During their marriage, Amara had often complained about being lonely. She said his lifestyle didn't allow for real friendships, that his friends and business associates only tolerated her because she was his wife. He had dismissed her concerns, told her she was being dramatic. Now he could see he had been wrong about everything. Is there anyone? David forced himself to ask the question that had been eating at him for months. "No romantic relationships that I could find," the investigator replied. "She seems focused on her work and her new community." David should have felt relief, but instead he felt worse. She wasn't avoiding relationships because she missed him. She simply seemed complete without one. Without him. The investigator gathered his papers and photos, preparing to leave. "Mr. Sterling, if I may ask, what are you planning to do with this information?" David looked up, his eyes bloodshot from too many sleepless nights and too much whiskey. "I'm going to get my wife back." "Ex-wife," the investigator corrected gently. "The divorce was finalized 11 months ago." "I don't care what the papers say," David said, his voice gaining strength. "She's still mine. She'll always be mine." The investigator's expression grew concerned. "Sir, she left for a reason. Maybe it would be better to let her be happy." "Happy?" David laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "She can't be truly happy without me. What we had, it was real. It was love." "Was it?" the investigator asked quietly. "Because from what I observed, she seems happier now than she ever was with you." The words hung in the air like a challenge. David stood up, his 6-foot frame imposing even in his disheveled state. "Get out." After the investigator left, David walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. The city sprawled below him, all glass and steel and endless possibility. He owned a piece of it all: buildings, businesses, people's livelihoods. He was David Sterling, the man who had built an empire before his 35th birthday. But none of it meant anything without Amara. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos of them together. Their wedding day, where she had looked radiant in white silk. Their honeymoon in Greece, where she had laughed at his terrible attempts to speak the language. The last good day they had shared before everything started falling apart. Looking at those pictures now, David could see what he had been blind to then. In every photo, Amara looked beautiful but distant. Her smiles never quite reached her eyes. She had been slipping away from him even then, and he had been too arrogant to notice. But he noticed now, and he was going to fix it. David walked to his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. He began making a list of everything he needed to do. First, he would need to clear his schedule. His assistant could handle the day-to-day operations of Sterling Industries. Second, he would need to find a place to stay in Portland. Somewhere close to Amara but not so obvious that she would feel threatened. Because that's what this was about, winning her back properly this time. Not with money or grand gestures or the force of his personality, but with patience and understanding. He would show her that he had changed, that he could be the man she needed him to be. David had never failed at anything he truly wanted. He had built his company from nothing, survived hostile takeovers, and come out on top in every business deal. Getting Amara back would be his greatest challenge yet, but he was confident he could do it. After all, they had been happy once. That happiness was still there, buried under years of misunderstandings and his own stubborn pride. He just needed to dig it out to remind her of what they had shared. As David made his plans, he felt more alive than he had in months. Purpose flowed through him like electricity. He had a mission now, a goal that mattered more than any business deal or acquisition. He was going to Portland and he was going to get his wife back. No matter what it took. The rain in Portland fell differently than it did in New York. It was softer somehow, less aggressive. David stood outside the community center where Amara worked, watching droplets slide down the windows of his rental car. He had been sitting there for 3 hours, waiting for her to emerge. When she finally appeared, his breath caught in his throat. She looked exactly like the photos, but seeing her in person hit him with unexpected force. Her hair was longer now, falling in natural waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple yellow dress and sneakers, completely different from the designer clothes he used to buy her. She was beautiful. More beautiful than he remembered. Amara walked to the bike rack and began unlocking her bicycle. David watched her movements, noting how relaxed she seemed. Her shoulders weren't tense like they used to be when she lived with him. Her face was peaceful, content. The investigator had been right. She looked happy. David started his car and followed at a distance as she pedaled through the quiet streets. He had expected to feel satisfied finally seeing her again, but instead, he felt hollow. She looked so complete, so whole. Like she had never needed him at all. After 20 minutes, Amara stopped at a small cafe called Sunrise Coffee. David parked across the street and watched through the window as she greeted the staff like old friends. An older woman with graying braids came out from behind the counter and hugged her warmly. This must be the woman from the investigator's photos. David felt a stab of jealousy watching their easy interaction. Amara had never been that comfortable with his mother, who had made it clear from the beginning that she thought her son could do better. David waited until Amara left the cafe before approaching. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and the woman behind the counter looked up with a friendly smile. "What can I get you, honey?" she asked. "Coffee black," David replied, studying her face. She had kind eyes and laugh lines that spoke of a life well lived. "I'm new in town. Just moved here from New York." "Oh, how exciting. What brings you to Portland?" David hesitated. He had rehearsed this conversation, but now the words felt clumsy in his mouth. "Work," he said finally. "I'm in consulting." It wasn't entirely a lie. He was consulting on how to win back his ex-wife, even if his only client was himself. "Well, you picked a good neighborhood," the woman said as she poured his coffee. "We're like family around here. I'm Gloria, by the way. I own this place." "David," he replied, accepting the steaming cup. "That woman who was just in here, she seemed nice." Gloria's face lit up. "Oh, you mean Amara? She's a sweetheart. Been coming in here almost every day since she moved to Portland. She's an art teacher at the community center down the street." "She seems popular," David observed, trying to keep his voice casual. "Everyone loves Amara," Gloria said with obvious affection. "She's got this way of making people feel seen, you know? Like they matter. She painted that mural on our back wall for free, just because she thought the space needed some color." David felt his chest tighten. This was the Amara he had fallen in love with, the woman whose compassion and creativity had drawn him like a magnet. But somehow, during their marriage, he had forgotten to appreciate those qualities. He had been too focused on molding her into the perfect corporate wife. "Has she lived here long?" David asked. "About a year now," Gloria replied. "She was pretty sad when she first arrived. Didn't talk much about her past, but you could tell she was running from something. Or someone." The words hit David like a physical blow. Running from someone. From him. "She seems better now though," Gloria continued, apparently not noticing David's reaction. "Portland has a way of healing people, you know? Giving them space to figure out who they really are." David paid for his coffee and left, Gloria's words echoing in his head. Space to figure out who they really are. Is that what Amara had needed? Space from him to discover herself? During their marriage, David had controlled everything. Where they lived, where they vacationed, who they socialized with. He had thought he was taking care of her, providing for her. Now he wondered if he had been suffocating her instead. That evening, David checked into a small hotel a few blocks from Amara's apartment. It was nothing like the luxury accommodations he was used to, but it was clean and quiet. From his window he could see the bookstore where she lived. He spent hours staring at that building, wondering what her life looked like now. Did she cook dinner for one? Did she still read mystery novels before bed? Did she ever think about him? Around 10 o'clock, a light came on in what he assumed was her apartment. David found himself holding his breath, hoping for a glimpse of her silhouette in the window. But the curtains remained closed, keeping her new life hidden from his desperate eyes. David pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Amara's number. He had called it hundreds of times over the past year, but it always went straight to voicemail. Her voice on the recording was different now, lighter, more confident. Not the uncertain woman who had lived in his shadow. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he say if she answered? How could he possibly explain a year of obsession and regret in a single conversation? Instead, he opened a new text message. His thumbs moved across the screen, typing and deleting words that never seemed right. How do you apologize for being blind? How do you ask someone to forgive you for taking their light and hiding it under a bushel? Finally he typed, I saw you today. You look happy. But he didn't send it. Instead, he deleted the message and put his phone away. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would figure out how to approach her. Tonight he would just sit in the darkness and remember what it felt like to be close to her, even if she had no idea he was there. As David watched the light in her apartment finally go out, he made himself a promise. He wouldn't make the same mistakes again. This time he would listen. This time he would put her happiness before his own needs. This time, he would prove that he was worthy of the love she had once given him so freely. But first he had to figure out how to earn the right to even speak to her again. The next morning, David woke before dawn. Sleep had been impossible anyway, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He dressed carefully in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, nothing that would scream wealth or corporate power. He needed to blend in, to become part of this community that had embraced Amara so completely. At 7 a.m. sharp, he was outside Sunrise Coffee when Gloria unlocked the doors. She smiled when she saw him, apparently pleased to have a repeat customer. You're up early for someone new to Portland, she said, tying her apron around her waist. Couldn't sleep, David replied honestly. Still adjusting to the time change. New York to Portland is only 3 hours difference, Gloria pointed out with a raised eyebrow. David felt heat creep up his neck. He needed to be more careful. You're right. I guess I'm just anxious about starting fresh. Something in his tone must have resonated with Gloria because her expression softened. Starting over can be scary, she said gently. But sometimes it's exactly what we need. She made his coffee without being asked, remembering how he liked it from the day before. David found himself touched by this small kindness. When was the last time someone had paid attention to his preferences without being paid to do so? Can I ask you something? David said as Gloria handed him his cup. Shoot. How do you know when you've really screwed up? Like, beyond the point of easy forgiveness. Gloria studied his face for a long moment. Honey, you look like a man carrying the weight of the world. What did you do? David hesitated. He had never talked about his personal life with strangers, but something about Gloria's maternal presence made him want to open up. I had something precious, he said slowly, and I took it for granted. I thought I was protecting it, but I was actually destroying it. By the time I realized what I was doing, it was too late. Was this something, a person? David nodded, not trusting his voice. Well, Gloria said, leaning against the counter, in my experience it's never really too late if you're willing to do the work. But you can't just say you're sorry and expect everything to go back to the way it was. You have to prove you've changed, and that takes time. What if they don't want to see you? What if they've moved on? Then you respect that, Gloria said firmly. Love isn't about what you want. It's about what's best for the other person. If they're better off without you, then the most loving thing you can do is leave them alone. David felt like she had punched him in the stomach. But what if you know you could make them happy? If you could be different this time? Could you? Gloria asked pointedly. Or do you just think you could because you're desperate and lonely? The question hung in the air between them. David opened his mouth to insist that he had changed, but the words died in his throat. Had he really changed, or was he just willing to say anything to get Amara back? The bell above the door chimed, and David's heart stopped. Amara walked in, shaking raindrops from her jacket. She looked even more beautiful in the morning light, her skin glowing with health and contentment. Morning, Gloria, she called out cheerfully, then stopped short when she saw David. For a moment they just stared at each other. David watched as recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by shock, then something that might have been fear. "Hello, Amara," David said softly. She took a step backward, her hand reaching for the door handle. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you." "How did you find me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. David realized too late how this must look to her. He had hired someone to track her down, followed her to her safe place, and was now confronting her in what had become her sanctuary. No wonder she looked terrified. "I hired someone," he admitted, deciding that honesty was his only option. "I know how that sounds, but You hired someone to find me?" Amara's voice rose in pitch. "David, we're divorced. It's over. You can't just show up in my life like this." Gloria stepped forward, her protective instincts clearly activated. "Amara, honey, do you know this man?" "He's my ex-husband," Amara said, still backing toward the door. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Gloria's friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by the fierce protectiveness of a mother bear. "I think you should leave," Gloria said to David, her voice cold as ice. "Please," David said, his eyes never leaving Amara's face. "Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." "I don't owe you anything," Amara replied, but David could hear the tremor in her voice. She was shaking, and he realized with horror that she was afraid of him. "You're right," he said, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "You don't owe me anything. I needed you to know that I understand now. What I did wrong. How I hurt you." "Understanding doesn't fix anything," Amara said, but she stopped moving toward the door. "I know. But maybe it's a start." They stood there in silence, the weight of 3 years of marriage and 1 year of separation hanging between them. David could see the war playing out on Amara's face, part of her curious about what he had to say, part of her wanting to run as far away as possible. 5 minutes, she said finally. "But not here. And not alone." Gloria stepped forward immediately. "I'll come with you." Amara nodded gratefully. "There's a park 2 blocks down. We can talk there." As they walked through the drizzling Portland morning, David felt like he was walking to his execution. This was his chance, maybe his only chance to explain himself to the woman he loved. But what could he possibly say that would make up for a year of harassment and 3 years of emotional neglect? When they reached the park, Amara sat on a bench under a large oak tree. Gloria stood nearby, close enough to intervene if needed but far enough away to give them some privacy. "Your 5 minutes start now," Amara said, checking her watch. David sat on the opposite end of the bench, careful to maintain distance between them. Looking at her profile, he was struck again by how different she seemed. Stronger. More sure of herself. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he began. "And I'm not here to ask for it. I just needed you to know that I see it now. How controlling I was. How I tried to make you into someone you weren't." Amara didn't respond, but she didn't get up and leave either. "I told myself I was protecting you, providing for you. But really, I was just protecting my image of what I thought our life should look like. I never asked what you wanted." "No," Amara said quietly. "You didn't." "I see how happy you are now," David continued. "And I understand that your happiness came from leaving me. That's hard to accept, but I'm trying to." For the first time since he had started talking, Amara looked directly at him. Her eyes were sad but clear. "Why are you here, David? What do you want from me?" It was the question he had been dreading because he didn't have a good answer. He wanted her back, but saying that would only prove that he hadn't learned anything at all. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I thought I did, but sitting here with you, seeing how much better you are without me, I don't know anymore." Something shifted in Amara's expression. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Pity maybe. Or recognition of the broken man sitting beside her. "I loved you," she said softly. "For a long time I loved you so much it hurt. But you made me feel invisible. Like I was just an accessory to your life." Each word was like a dagger to his heart, but David forced himself to listen without defending or explaining. "When I left, I was so angry," Amara continued. "But after a while the anger faded and I just felt sad. Sad for both of us because we could have been so good together if you had just seen me." "I see you now," David whispered. "Too late," Amara replied, but not unkindly. They sat in silence as David's 5 minutes ticked away. When Amara finally stood up, David felt like he was watching his last hope walk away. "Goodbye, David," she said. "Will I see you again?" Amara paused, considering. "I don't think that would be good for either of us." She walked away without looking back, Gloria falling into step beside her. David remained on the bench, watching them disappear into the Portland morning. He had gotten his 5 minutes and he had blown it completely. But at least now he knew the truth. Amara was better off without him, and the most loving thing he could do was leave her alone. The question was, did he love her enough to do it? David didn't leave Portland. Instead, he extended his hotel stay and spent his days walking the same streets Amara walked, eating at the same cafes, shopping at the same bookstore below her apartment. He told himself he was trying to understand her new life, but really he was torturing himself with glimpses of the happiness she had found without him. He never approached her again. He had promised himself that much after their conversation in the park. But he couldn't bring himself to leave either. 3 days after their encounter, David was sitting in a different coffee shop when he overheard a conversation that changed everything. "I can't believe someone was asking questions about Amara," a young woman was saying to her friend. "Like, who does that? Shows up out of nowhere wanting to know where she works, where she lives." David's blood ran cold. He hadn't been as careful as he thought. "Did you tell Gloria?" the friend asked. "Of course. She's worried sick. Amara's been through enough without some creep stalking her." Stalking. The word hit David like a physical blow. Is that what he was doing? He had told himself he was trying to understand, to make amends, but from the outside, his behavior looked exactly like what it was, obsessive and frightening. David left his coffee untouched and walked out into the rain. He pulled out his phone and called the only person who might be able to talk sense into him. "David?" His sister Sarah answered on the second ring. "It's been months since you called." "I'm in Portland," David said without preamble. "Oregon? What are you doing there?" "Amara lives here." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that David wondered if the call had dropped. "David," Sarah said finally, her voice carefully controlled, "please tell me you're not doing what I think you're doing." "I just wanted to see her. To apologize." "And have you?" "Apologized. I tried. She gave me 5 minutes and I wasted them." Sarah sighed heavily. "Come home, David. This isn't healthy." "I can't. Not yet." "You can't what? You can't leave her alone? You can't accept that the marriage is over? What exactly can't you do?" David found himself standing outside the bookstore where Amara lived. The light was on in her apartment, and he could see her shadow moving behind the curtains. "I can't accept that she's better off without me," he said quietly. "But she isn't she? You said yourself that she looks happy." "She does." "Then what are you doing there? What do you think is going to happen?" David didn't have an answer. He had been running on pure desperation for so long that he had stopped thinking about the endgame. "I'm calling Mom," Sarah said. "She's going to book you a flight home and you're going to be on it." "I'm not ready." "David, listen to me very carefully. What you're doing right now is not love. It's possession. It's the same controlling behavior that drove Amara away in the first place." The words hit him like cold water. Sarah was right, of course. He was still trying to control the situation, still trying to force an outcome that would make him feel better without considering what Amara wanted. "I know you're hurting," Sarah continued, her voice gentler now. "But you're going to end up making things worse for both of you if you don't leave. Amara deserves to feel safe in her own town." Safe. Another word that cut deep. Amara should feel safe, but David's presence was taking that away from her. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll come home. Promise me." "I promise." David ended the call and looked up at Amara's window one more time. As he watched, she moved to the window and pushed the curtain aside slightly. For a moment he thought she was looking down at him, but then he realized she was just checking the weather. Still, the sight of her face, even partially obscured by distance and glass, made his chest ache with longing. David forced himself to turn away and walk back to his hotel. He would pack tonight and fly home tomorrow. Sarah was right. This wasn't love, it was selfishness dressed up as devotion. But as he packed his few belongings, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a mistake. Not the mistake of coming to Portland, that had been wrong from the beginning. But the mistake of giving up entirely. There had to be a middle ground between stalking Amara and disappearing from her life completely. Some way to prove that he had changed without imposing his presence on her unwillingly. David pulled out his phone and opened a new text message to Amara. This time he didn't hesitate. "I'm leaving Portland tomorrow. I know my being here made you uncomfortable and I'm sorry for that. You deserve to feel safe and happy and I won't interfere with that anymore. But I want you to know that seeing you again, even briefly, reminded me of why I fell in love with you in the first place. Not because you were beautiful or because you fit into my life, but because you have a light inside you that makes everyone around you better. I'm sorry I tried to dim that light. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. I just needed you to know that I see you now. Really see you. And you're incredible. He read the message 3 times before sending it. It said everything he needed to say without asking for anything in return. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with a response. Thank you for leaving. And thank you for the apology. I hope you find peace, David. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't anger either. It was closure, and maybe that was enough. David finished packing and called the airline to book a flight for the next morning. As he prepared for bed, he made himself another promise. He would leave Amara alone, but he wouldn't give up on becoming the man she had deserved all along. If he ever saw her again, he wanted to be someone worthy of her light. The flight home felt like the longest 3 hours of David's life. Every mile between him and Portland felt like a step backward, away from the only thing that had ever really mattered to him. But for the first time in a year, David felt like he was doing the right thing, even if it was killing him. 6 months passed like a blur of therapy sessions, business meetings, and sleepless nights. David threw himself into changing everything about his life, starting with the things that had driven Amara away. He sold the penthouse apartment that had felt more like a museum than a home. In its place, he bought a modest brownstone in Brooklyn with large windows and room for the art studio he had never let Amara have. He donated most of his expensive suits to charity and learned to dress like a normal person instead of a corporate robot. Most importantly, he started seeing Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a therapist who specialized in relationship patterns and emotional intelligence. Their weekly sessions were brutal but necessary. Tell me about control, Dr. Chen said during one particularly difficult session. I don't understand the question. You keep saying you were controlling with Amara, but I don't think you really understand what that means. Give me a specific example. David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. These sessions always made him feel like he was being dissected under a microscope. I used to plan all our social events without asking her what she wanted to do, he said finally. Why? Because I knew what would be best for us. For my business, for our reputation. For your reputation, Dr. Chin corrected. What about what Amara wanted? I thought she wanted the same things I did. Did you ever ask her? David fell silent. The honest answer was no, he had never asked. He had simply assumed that Amara would be grateful for the life he was providing. Control isn't just about making decisions for someone else, Dr. Chin explained. It's about removing their agency, their right to choose their own path. When you planned your social calendar without input from Amara, you were telling her that her preferences didn't matter. But I was trying to take care of her. Were you? Or were you trying to make sure she fit into the life you had planned? The question haunted David for days. He started thinking about all the ways he had tried to shape Amara into his ideal wife. The clothes he bought her that reflected his taste rather than hers. The friends he encouraged her to make, all wives of his business associates. The way he had dismissed her interest in teaching because it didn't fit his image of a successful man's spouse. He had never seen it as controlling because his intentions had seemed good. But intentions didn't matter if the effect was to make someone feel like they didn't exist. During this time, David also made changes to his business. He promoted his assistant, Janet, to chief operating officer and stepped back from the day-to-day operations. He started a foundation focused on arts education, specifically supporting community programs like the one where Amara worked. He never mentioned Amara's name in connection with the foundation, but he knew she would approve of its mission. The thought of her approval was both comforting and painful. David also started volunteering at a local community center in Brooklyn, teaching basic business skills to young entrepreneurs. It was the first time in his adult life that he was doing something without any expectation of personal gain. The kids he worked with were tough, streetwise teenagers who had no patience for corporate speak or fake sincerity. They called him out when he was being condescending, ignored him when he was boring, and challenged him to be better than he had ever been before. Mr. Sterling, one of his students, a 15-year-old named Jazz, said after a particularly frustrating session. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really here? And don't give me that giving back to the community crap. What's your real reason? David looked around the room at the other students, all of whom were watching him with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. I hurt someone I loved, he said finally. I want to be better than I was. What did you do? I tried to control her life instead of loving her for who she was. Jazz nodded as if this made perfect sense. My mom always says you can't love someone and own them at the same time. Your mom sounds wise. She is. So are you going to fix it? I don't know if I can. I think I might have lost my chance. Maybe, Jazz said with the brutal honesty of youth. But at least you're trying to be better. That's something. It was something David realized. Even if Amara never forgave him, even if he spent the rest of his life missing her, at least he was becoming the person she had needed him to be all along. The revelation came during a session with Dr. Chin 8 months after David's return from Portland. I keep waiting for her to see that I've changed, David admitted. But she doesn't even know I'm changing. Is that why you're doing it? For her to see. David opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped. Was it? Over the past months, the changes in his life had started to feel natural, right? He enjoyed his work at the community center. He liked living in a home that felt warm instead of impressive. He was happier even without Amara. I don't think so, he said slowly. I think I'm doing it because it feels good to be someone I can respect. Dr. Chin smiled, the first time David had seen her do so in months of sessions. That's growth, she said. You're finally changing for yourself instead of trying to manipulate an outcome. But I still miss her. Of course you do. Love doesn't just disappear because someone is gone. But missing someone and needing to possess them are two different things. That night, David sat in his new home office and wrote a letter he never intended to send. It was addressed to Amara, and in it he told her about everything that had changed in his life. The therapy, the volunteering, the way he was learning to see love as freedom instead of ownership. Writing the letter felt like a release, a way to share his growth with her even though she would never read it. When he finished, he put it in his desk drawer with the dozens of other unsent letters he had written over the past months. Maybe someday he would find the courage to send one. But for now, it was enough to know that he was becoming someone worthy of the love he had lost. David's life settled into a routine that felt foreign but peaceful. Monday through Friday he worked at Sterling Industries, though his role had shifted from tyrannical CEO to collaborative leader. His employees were shocked by the changes in him, but productivity actually increased when people felt heard instead of dominated. Tuesday and Thursday evenings he volunteered at the Brooklyn Community Center. Saturdays were for therapy with Dr. Chin. Sundays he spent alone, reading books that Amara had recommended years ago but he had never made time for. It was during one of these quiet Sunday afternoons that his phone rang with an unexpected call. David Sterling? The voice was unfamiliar, older, with a slight southern accent. Yes, this is David. My name is Robert Johnson. I believe you know my daughter. David's heart stopped. Johnson. Amara's maiden name. Mr. Johnson, David managed. How did you get this number? That's not important right now. What matters is that I need to talk to you about Amara. Is she okay? The words came out in a rush, panic flooding David's system. She's fine. Physically. But there's something you need to know, and I think it's best if we meet in person. David's mind raced. Why would Amara's father want to see him? They had met only a handful of times during the marriage, and those encounters had been strained at best. I can fly to wherever you are, David said immediately. I'm actually in New York. Business trip. Can you meet me tonight? They arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant in Manhattan. David spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of anxious confusion. Had something happened to Amara? Was she in trouble? The thought of her needing help and not being able to call him was agony. Robert Johnson was already seated when David arrived at the restaurant. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 60s, with the same warm brown eyes as his daughter. But those eyes were hard now, studying David with obvious distrust. Thank you for coming, Robert said as David sat down. Mr. Johnson, please tell me what's wrong. Is Amara? Amara doesn't know I'm here, Robert interrupted. And she can never know. Do you understand? David nodded, though he was more confused than ever. Robert signaled the waiter for coffee, then leaned back in his chair. You really did a number on my daughter, you know that? The words hit David like a slap. I know. I've spent the last year trying to figure out how to make amends. Have you now? Robert's tone was skeptical. From what I hear, you spent some time stalking her in Portland. David felt heat creep up his neck. I was in a bad place. I realize now how wrong that was. Damn right it was wrong. Do you have any idea what you put her through? She was terrified for weeks after you showed up. Each word was like a knife to David's heart. He had known his appearance in Portland had frightened Amara, but hearing it from her father made it feel worse somehow. I'm sorry, David said quietly. I was desperate and selfish and I scared her. I hate myself for that. Robert studied him for a long moment. You look different than I remember. I am different. Are you? Or are you just better at hiding the arrogance? It was a fair question, and David took time to consider his answer. I'm in therapy. I've changed how I live, how I work, how I treat people. I can't prove it to you in one conversation, but I'm not the same man who hurt your daughter. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't, David said honestly. I wouldn't if I were you. Something shifted in Robert's expression. Maybe it was David's honesty, or maybe it was the pain that David couldn't hide despite his best efforts. My daughter was broken when she left you, Robert said quietly. Not just sad or angry. Broken. Like she had forgotten who she was. David closed his eyes, trying to block out the image of Amara in that kind of pain. It took her months to remember that she had opinions, preferences, dreams of her own. You had made her feel so small that she didn't think she deserved to take up space in the world. I never meant. It doesn't matter what you meant, Robert cut him off. What matters is what you did. And what you did was nearly destroy a beautiful, vibrant woman. David opened his eyes and met Robert's gaze. Then why are you here? If I'm such a monster, why risk telling me anything about her? Robert was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. Because despite everything, she still loves you. The words hit David like lightning. What? She doesn't want to love you. She fights it every day. But love doesn't just disappear because someone hurts you. It gets buried, twisted, but it doesn't die. David felt like he couldn't breathe. She told you this? She didn't have to. I'm her father. I've watched her try to move on for over a year now and she can't. She dates occasionally, but it never goes anywhere because she's still comparing every man to you. But she seems so happy in Portland. She's built a life there. She has. And she is happy in many ways. But there's a part of her that's still waiting for you to become the man she needed you to be. David felt tears burning behind his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that my daughter deserves better than to spend her life missing someone who didn't deserve her. But I'm also saying that if you have really changed, if you can prove that you see her as a person instead of a possession, then maybe you deserve another chance. How can I prove that? She won't even talk to me. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. She's been accepted to graduate school. Art therapy program at NYU. She starts in the fall. David stared at the envelope, afraid to hope. She's coming back to New York? She doesn't want to. She's scared of running into you, scared of falling back into old patterns. But it's the best program in the country for what she wants to do, and she's worked too hard to let fear hold her back. What do you want from me? I want you to prove that you've changed. Not to me, not to her, but to yourself. She'll be here in 3 months. If you're really different, if you can love her without trying to control her, then maybe you'll get your second chance. Robert stood up, leaving the envelope on the table. But if you hurt her again, if you make her feel small or invisible or afraid, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Are we clear? David nodded, still staring at the envelope. One more thing, Robert said. She can never know I told you about the graduate program. If she finds out, she'll assume you're manipulating the situation, and any chance you might have had will be gone. After Robert left, David sat alone at the table for an hour, staring at the envelope. Inside was a copy of Amara's acceptance letter to NYU's art therapy program. She would be studying just 20 minutes from his home. The old David would have seen this as an opportunity to orchestrate meetings, to put himself in her path and force interactions. But the new David understood that this was a test. Could he let her come back to New York without interfering? Could he give her the space to make her own choices? That night, David called Dr. Chen's emergency line. I need to see you, he said when she answered. Something's happened and I need to make sure I don't screw this up. What's happened, David? She's coming back to New York. And I need to prove that I love her enough to let her be free. The next few months would be the ultimate test of everything David had learned about love, control, and letting go. He just hoped he was strong enough to pass it. The news that Amara was returning to New York consumed David's thoughts for days. He found himself making lists of all the places she might go, all the coffee shops and bookstores and art galleries that would appeal to her. Then he would force himself to throw the lists away, knowing that tracking her movements would be a return to his old controlling patterns. Dr. Chen helped him work through the temptation during their sessions. What's the difference between coincidentally being somewhere she might be and deliberately seeking her out? She asked during one particularly intense session. Intent, David replied. If I go to a coffee shop because I want coffee, that's normal. If I go because I hope to see her, that's stalking. And how can you tell the difference in the moment? David thought carefully. I guess I have to be honest with myself about my motivations. If I'm choosing a place because she might be there, then I'm crossing a line. Good. What else? I need to respect her space. If I do run into her, I can't use it as an excuse to start a conversation. She made it clear that she doesn't want contact with me. That must be painful for you. It is. But her comfort is more important than my pain. It was a hard one understanding, but David meant it. Over the past year of therapy and self-reflection, he had learned to distinguish between his wants and her needs. What he wanted was to see her, talk to her, convince her to give him another chance. What she needed was space to live her life without interference from him. Love, he was learning, meant choosing her needs over his wants. 3 weeks before the fall semester began, David was at his usual Sunday coffee shop in Brooklyn when he saw a familiar figure across the street. His heart stopped. Amara was standing outside an apartment building, keys in hand, talking to a woman who looked like she might be a landlord. She was wearing a yellow sundress and sandals, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked nervous but excited. Every instinct in David's body screamed at him to cross the street, to help her with whatever she was doing, to insert himself into her life. Instead, he turned away from the window and focused on his book. She was apartment hunting, probably. Getting ready for her move to New York. The fact that she was looking in Brooklyn, just a few neighborhoods over from where he lived, made his chest tight with longing. But he stayed in his seat and let her handle her life without his interference. When he looked up again 20 minutes later, she was gone. That evening, David called his sister Sarah. "I saw her today," he said without preamble. "Amara?" "In New York." "Brooklyn. She was looking at apartments, I think." "Did you talk to her?" "No. I stayed where I was and let her do her thing." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I'm proud of you." "Are you?" "Because it feels like torture. The fact that it's hard makes it more meaningful, not less. A year ago, you would have found an excuse to approach her." Sarah was right. A year ago, David would have rationalized a dozen reasons why he needed to help her find an apartment. He would have convinced himself that he was being helpful, not manipulative. "Do you think she saw me?" David asked. "Does it matter?" "I guess not. If she did, she chose not to acknowledge me, which I have to respect." "You really have changed," Sarah said softly. "I'm trying to." As August turned to September, David found himself hyper-aware of his surroundings. Every brunette woman on the subway made his heart skip. Every art supply store or coffee shop felt like a potential minefield. But he maintained his routines, his boundaries, his commitment to giving Amara space. The test came on a rainy Tuesday evening in early September. David was leaving his volunteer session at the community center when he saw her standing at the bus stop across the street. She was soaked from the rain, shivering, and clearly frustrated as bus after bus passed without stopping. This time, there was no way she hadn't seen him. They made eye contact across the street, both of them freezing in place. David watched emotions play across her face. Surprise, anxiety, and something else he couldn't identify. The old David would have rushed across the street with his umbrella, offering her a ride home and using her vulnerability as an opening for conversation. The new David stood where he was, letting her make the choice about whether to interact. After what felt like an eternity, Amara crossed the street toward him. "Hello, David," she said quietly. "Hi." He was proud that his voice came out steady despite the fact that his heart was pounding. "You're volunteering here?" She nodded toward the community center. "Teaching basic business skills to teenagers." "You." "There's an art therapy program for kids. I've been helping out while I get settled." They stood there in the rain, both of them getting soaked but neither wanting to be the first to leave. "How's graduate school?" David asked. "It's good. Challenging. The program is everything I hoped it would be." "I'm glad." Another silence stretched between them. David could see that Amara was studying his face, perhaps looking for signs of the man she had been married to. "You look different," she said finally. "I am different." "Are you?" It was the same question her father had asked, and David gave the same honest answer. "I'm trying to be." A bus finally stopped, and Amara glanced toward it uncertainly. "You should take it," David said. "You're soaked." She nodded but didn't move immediately. "David?" "Yeah." "What you said in your text message about seeing me for who I really am, did you mean that?" "Every word." "Then prove it," she said quietly. "Don't follow me. Don't show up at my school or my apartment or the places I go. If you really see me, then you'll understand that I need space to figure out who I am in this city without you in it." David nodded even though the request felt like a physical pain. "I understand." "Do you?" "Because in Portland you said you understood but then you stayed anyway." "I was selfish then. I was thinking about what I needed instead of what you needed." "And now?" "Now I know that loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include you." Something shifted in Amara's expression. For just a moment, her carefully maintained distance wavered, and David caught a glimpse of the woman who had once loved him. "I have to go," she said, turning toward the bus. "Amara?" She paused without turning around. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For going back to school, for pursuing your dreams. You're going to help a lot of people." She did turn around then, and David was surprised to see tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, then got on the bus and was gone. David stood in the rain long after the bus disappeared, feeling like something fundamental had shifted between them. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it wasn't hostility either. It was the first real conversation they had had in over 2 years, and for the first time, David felt like she had actually seen the changes in him. But more importantly, he had kept his promise. He had put her needs before his wants, even when every instinct screamed at him to do otherwise. It was progress. Maybe not the kind of progress that would lead to reconciliation, but the kind that meant he was finally becoming the man he should have been all along. Fall in New York brought its own challenges. David found himself taking different routes to work, avoiding the subway stops near NYU, fighting the constant temptation to drive past the art therapy clinic where he knew Amara was doing her practicum. The city felt smaller now that she was in it, every corner holding the possibility of an accidental encounter. But David kept his word. He gave her space even when it felt like it was killing him. His volunteer work at the Brooklyn Community Center became his salvation. The kids he worked with were dealing with real problems: poverty, family dysfunction, limited opportunities, and their struggles put his own pain in perspective. "Mr. Sterling, you seem distracted today," Jez observed during a session on business planning. She was 17 now, sharp as a tack and planning to apply for college scholarships. "Sorry? What were you saying about your marketing strategy?" "I was saying that you look like someone stole your lunch money. What's going on?" David looked around the room at his students, 8 teenagers from various backgrounds, all working toward their own version of the American dream. They had come to trust him over the past year, and he had learned to be honest with them. "There's someone I care about," he said carefully. "Someone I heard a long time ago. She's back in the city now, and it's hard to know that she's so close but that I can't be part of her life." "Did you apologize?" asked Marcus, a 16-year-old whose business plan involved opening a food truck. "I tried to. But sometimes sorry isn't enough. My grandmother always says that actions speak louder than words," offered Keisha, who was developing a tutoring service for elementary school kids. "Maybe instead of trying to apologize, you should just show her you're different." "How do I show her if I can't talk to her?" "You don't show her," Jazz said with the wisdom that came from growing up too fast. "You show yourself. You be the person you should have been in the first place, even if she never sees it." The kid was right, of course. David's growth couldn't be dependent on Amara's approval or forgiveness. It had to be genuine, sustainable, and complete in itself. That evening, David made a decision that surprised even him. He called the art therapy clinic where Amara was doing her practicum and asked to speak to the director. "I'd like to make a donation," he told Dr. Martinez when she came on the line. "I understand you work with children who have experienced trauma." "Yes, we do." "May I ask what prompted your interest in our program?" David chose his words carefully. "I know someone who believes deeply in the power of art to heal. I'd like to support that work." "That's wonderful. What kind of donation were you thinking? What would make the biggest difference for your program?" Dr. Martinez sounded surprised by the question. Most donors, David realized, wanted to dictate how their money was used rather than asking what was actually needed. "Honestly, we need supplies. Art materials are expensive and we work with kids who can't afford their own. We also need funding for scholarships. There are children who would benefit from our program but whose families can't pay. Consider both handled," David said. "I'll have my foundation send over a check. The only condition is that the donation remains anonymous." "Mr. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "It's not important. What matters is that you can help more kids." After he hung up, David felt something he hadn't experienced in months: peace. He wasn't making the donation to impress Amara or to manipulate a situation. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do, because it supported work that mattered. 3 weeks later, David was reading in his local coffee shop when he overheard a conversation at the next table. "I still can't believe it," a young woman was saying to her companion. "Someone donated $50,000 to the clinic, completely anonymously. Dr. Martinez says we can expand our program to serve twice as many kids." David looked up and realized the woman was one of Amara's classmates from NYU. He recognized her from the photos on the art therapy program's website. "That's amazing," her friend replied. "Any idea who the donor was?" None. Dr. Martinez tried to find out, but whoever it was really wanted to stay anonymous. All we know is that they said they knew someone who believed in art therapy. David felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with recognition or gratitude. The donation was helping children, supporting work that aligned with his values, and advancing a cause that Amara cared about. The fact that she would never know he was responsible for it made it even more meaningful. This was what love looked like when it wasn't about possession or control. It was quiet, anonymous, focused entirely on the well-being of the beloved without expectation of return. December brought the first real test of David's resolve. The community center where he volunteered was hosting a holiday fundraiser, and the guest speaker was Dr. Martinez from the art therapy clinic, which meant there was a good chance that Amara would be there. David's first instinct was to skip the event entirely, but he had committed to helping with the fundraiser months ago, and his students were counting on him. Running away would be letting them down. So he went, but he stayed in the back of the room and kept a low profile. Sure enough, Amara was there with several of her classmates, sitting in the front row and taking notes as Dr. Martinez spoke about the importance of community support for therapeutic programs. David watched her from across the room, noting how engaged she was, how her face lit up when Dr. Martinez mentioned the anonymous donation that had transformed their program. She looked healthy, happy, fulfilled. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. After the presentation, there was a reception with coffee and cookies. David helped serve, keeping busy in the kitchen and avoiding the main room where Amara was networking with other attendees. He thought he had successfully navigated the evening until Jazz appeared at his elbow. "The lady in the blue dress keeps looking over here," she said casually. David's heart stopped. "What lady?" "Pretty brown skin, looks like she knows you but isn't sure if she should say hi." David glanced toward the main room and caught sight of Amara standing near the refreshment table, holding a cup of coffee and indeed looking in his direction. "She's someone I used to know," David said carefully. "Someone you hurt?" David nodded. "Well, she doesn't look angry. She looks sad. Maybe you should go talk to her." "I can't. I promised to give her space." Jazz studied his face with the intensity that made her such a good student. Maybe space doesn't mean pretending the other person doesn't exist. Maybe it means letting them choose whether to interact with you. Before David could respond, Jazz had disappeared back into the crowd. A few minutes later, he saw her talking to Amara, gesturing toward the kitchen where David was working. David's heart hammered in his chest. What was Jazz doing? His question was answered when Amara appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." David set down the stack of plates he had been washing. "I didn't know you'd be here. Dr. Martinez is my supervisor. I wanted to support the fundraiser." "That's good of you." They stood there in awkward silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "Your students seem to adore you," Amara said finally. "They're good kids. They keep me honest." "Jazz told me you've been volunteering here for over a year." David nodded, not sure where this conversation was going. "She also said that you've changed. That you're not the same person you used to be. What do you think?" David asked. Amara studied his face for a long moment. "I think you look lighter, less angry. The man I was married to always seemed like he was carrying the weight of the world. I was carrying the weight of trying to control everything. It's exhausting. And now I'm learning to let go. To trust that things will work out the way they're supposed to, even if it's not the way I planned." Something shifted in Amara's expression. For the first time since their divorce, she looked at him without fear or defensiveness. "I heard about the donation to our clinic," she said. "Anonymous benefactor. Very generous." David kept his expression neutral. "That's great. The program deserves support." "It is great. We're going to be able to help so many more children." She paused, then added quietly, "Whoever made that donation understands what we're trying to do. They get that healing happens through creative expression, through being seen and heard." "Sounds like someone who's learned a few things about seeing and hearing," David replied. They looked at each other across the small kitchen, years of pain and growth and unspoken words flowing between them. For a moment, David thought Amara might say something more, might take a step toward bridging the gap between them. Instead, she smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and said, "I should get back to the reception." "Of course." "David?" "Yeah. Thank you. For giving me space. For letting me find my way back to New York without interference. It means more than you know." After she left, David stood alone in the kitchen, feeling like something fundamental had shifted between them. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was recognition. She saw the changes in him, acknowledged his efforts to be better. For the first time in 2 years, David allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, their story wasn't over yet. Spring arrived in New York with unusual warmth, and with it came news that changed everything. David was reviewing foundation applications in his office when his assistant knocked on the door. "There's a call for you," Janet said. "Someone named Dr. Martinez from the Children's Art Therapy Clinic." David's blood ran cold. Had something happened to Amara? "Mr. Sterling?" Dr. Martinez's voice was professional but warm when David picked up the phone. "Yes, this is David Sterling. I hope you don't mind me calling. I know you prefer to keep your donations anonymous, but I have a rather unusual situation that I hoped you might be able to help with." David's mind raced. How had she connected him to the anonymous donation? "I'm not sure I understand," he said carefully. "One of our best practicum students is graduating next month. She's brilliant, compassionate, and has a natural gift for working with traumatized children. We'd like to offer her a full-time position, but our current funding doesn't allow for it." David's heart started beating faster. "Go on." "I was wondering if your foundation might be interested in sponsoring a new position. I know it's a significant commitment, but this young woman could transform our program." "What's her name?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. "Amara Johnson. She's extraordinary, Mr. Sterling. In 3 months, she's connected with children that other therapists couldn't reach. She has this way of seeing people, really seeing them, that's rare in our field." David closed his eyes, feeling the irony of the situation wash over him. Dr. Martinez was describing the very qualities that had made him fall in love with Amara in the first place. Her ability to see into people's hearts, to make them feel valued and understood. Would this position allow her to stay in New York? David asked. Yes. She's been worried about having to leave the city to find work. This would let her continue her career here. David thought about Amara's father's words from months ago, that she was scared of staying in New York because of him, but that this program was too important to her dreams to give up. "I'll fund the position," David said without hesitation. "Really? Just like that?" "Just like that. But the same conditions apply. The donation must remain anonymous. Ms. Johnson can never know where the funding came from." "May I ask why anonymity is so important to you?" David considered how to answer without revealing too much. "Let's just say that Ms. Johnson and I have a complicated history. I don't want her to feel like she owes me anything or that there are strings attached to this opportunity." "That's very generous of you." "It's not generosity. It's justice. She deserves the chance to build the career she wants without interference from her past." After David hung up, he sat in his office staring out at the city skyline. In funding Amara's position, he was ensuring that she would stay in New York, the same city where he lived. But he was also ensuring that she could pursue her dreams without compromise, which meant more to him than proximity ever could. 2 weeks later, David was having coffee with Dr. Chen when she made an observation that stopped him cold. "You're different today," she said, studying his face across the table. "Different how?" "Peaceful. More settled than I've seen you since we started working together." David thought about it. She was right. Despite the fact that Amara was still out of reach, despite the uncertainty about their future, he felt more at peace than he had in months. "I think I've finally learned the difference between loving someone and needing to possess them," he said. "Tell me about that." "I helped her get something she wanted without her knowing it was from me. I made sure she could pursue her dreams without any interference from me. And instead of feeling frustrated that I didn't get credit or recognition, I felt happy. Happy that she was happy." Dr. Chin smiled. "That's a significant breakthrough, David." "Is it?" "You've learned to find joy in her success rather than trying to be the source of it. That's the foundation of healthy love." That afternoon, David decided to take a walk through Central Park. It was something he had started doing when he needed to think, when the walls of his office felt too confining. He was sitting on a bench near the Shakespeare Garden when he heard a familiar laugh. He looked up to see Amara walking with a group of her classmates, all of them animated and clearly celebrating something. David's first instinct was to leave before she saw him. But as he stood up, Amara looked in his direction and their eyes met across the garden. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Amara said something to her friends and walked over to where David was standing. "Hi," she said, and there was something different in her voice. Less guarded, more open. "Hi. You look happy." "I am. We just found out about our job placements. I got offered a position at the clinic where I've been doing my practicum." "That's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you." Amara sat down on the bench, and after a moment's hesitation, David sat beside her, careful to maintain some distance. Can I ask you something? Amara said. Of course. Why didn't you fight the divorce? You could have made it difficult for me, drawn it out, but you didn't. You just let me go. David was quiet for a long moment, trying to find the right words. Because fighting would have been about what I wanted, not what you needed. And you needed to be free. That must have been hard for you. The hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the most important. They sat in comfortable silence, watching people pass by on the winding paths. David felt like he was living in a dream, sitting beside Amara in the spring sunshine, having a real conversation without anger or fear. I know it was you, Amara said quietly. David's heart stopped. What? The donations to the clinic. The funding for my position. I know it was you. I don't know what you're talking about. Amara smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had given him since before their marriage fell apart. David, I was married to you for 3 years. I know how you think, how you operate. Anonymous donations that happen to benefit exactly the causes I care about? A funded position that opens up just when I need it most? It's too much of a coincidence. David felt panic rising in his chest. Amara, I never meant for you to feel obligated or... I don't feel obligated, she interrupted. I feel seen. The man I was married to would have made those donations with great fanfare, expecting gratitude and recognition. The fact that you went to such lengths to remain anonymous tells me that you really have changed. David didn't know what to say. Everything he had worked for over the past year, the careful distance, the anonymous support, was crumbling, but somehow it didn't feel like failure. I just wanted you to be able to pursue your dreams, he said finally. Without interference from you. Without interference from me. Amara turned to face him fully. Do you remember what you said to me at our wedding? In your vows. David did remember. He had promised to love her, to cherish her, to support her dreams and help her become the best version of herself. I said I would help you become who you were meant to be, he said softly. And then I spent 3 years trying to make you into someone else entirely. We both made mistakes, David. The words hung in the air between them, full of possibility and pain and hope. I should go, Amara said, standing up. My friends are waiting. Of course. She started to walk away, then turned back. David? Yeah. Thank you. For the donations, for the job, for giving me space to grow. But mostly, thank you for becoming the man I always believed you could be. As she walked away, David felt like his heart might burst. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, and it certainly wasn't reconciliation. But it was recognition, acknowledgement, and maybe even respect. For the first time in 2 years, David Sterling believed that their story might have a happy ending after all. Summer arrived with a heat wave that had the entire city seeking air conditioning and cold drinks. David had just finished a particularly challenging session with his student entrepreneurs when Jazz cornered him in the hallway. Mr. Sterling, can I talk to you? Of course. What's on your mind? Jazz glanced around to make sure they were alone, then fixed him with her signature no-nonsense stare. That lady from the winter fundraiser, Amara, she's been asking about you. David's heart skipped a beat. What kind of asking? She came by last week to volunteer with the art program. Ended up talking to me and Marcus about our business plans. But she also asked a lot of questions about you. Like what kind of teacher you are, whether you're happy if you ever talk about your past. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're the best teacher we've ever had. That you actually listen to us instead of just telling us what to do. That you seem happier now than when you first started coming here. David felt warmth spread through his chest. Thank you. But here's the thing, Mr. Sterling. She looked sad when I told her all that good stuff about you. Like she was happy for you but sad for herself, you know? David knew exactly what Jazz meant. It was the same bittersweet feeling he carried every day, joy at seeing Amara thriving mixed with sorrow that they couldn't share that happiness together. Maybe, Jazz continued, it's time to stop being so noble and actually talk to each other like grown-ups. Before David could respond, Jazz had disappeared down the hallway, leaving him standing there with his thoughts spinning. That evening, David was walking home from the subway when he saw Amara sitting on a bench outside his neighborhood coffee shop. She was reading a book, her hair catching the golden light of the setting sun. When she looked up and saw him, she didn't seem surprised. Hi, she said, closing her book. This is my neighborhood. I know. I was hoping I might run into you. David's breath caught in his throat. Oh. Amara patted the bench beside her. Will you sit with me? David sat down, careful to maintain some distance but close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, something light and floral that he didn't recognize. She had never worn perfume when they were married. "I've been thinking about our conversation in the park," Amara said. "About mistakes and changes and second chances." "Me too. I need to tell you something and I need you to just listen, okay? Don't interrupt or try to fix anything. Just listen." David nodded, though his heart was racing. "When I left you, I was so angry. Not just at you but at myself for losing who I was in our marriage. I blamed you for controlling me, but the truth is I let you. I handed over my power because it was easier than fighting for what I wanted." David started to speak, but Amara held up her hand. "I'm not done. Moving to Portland was the best thing I could have done for myself. I remembered who I was when I wasn't trying to be Mrs. David Sterling. I found my voice again, my dreams, my strength. And I needed to do that alone." She turned to face him, and David was struck by how clear and confident her eyes were now. "But here's what I've realized over the past few months. You changed too. The man who funded my position at the clinic, who donated to help children he's never met, who stepped back and gave me space to grow, that's not the man I divorced." "Amara?" "I'm still not done," she said with a small smile. "I've been talking to Dr. Chin." David's eyes widened in shock. "What?" "She called me a month ago. Said you had given her permission to reach out if she thought it would be helpful. We've had several conversations about healing, forgiveness, and whether people can really change." David felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. "I don't understand." "She told me about your therapy sessions. Not the details, she would never violate your privacy like that. But she helped me understand how hard you've worked to become a better person. And she helped me understand something important about myself too." "What's that?" "That I never stopped loving you. I stopped trusting you, stopped believing in us, but I never stopped loving you. And that scared me because I thought it meant I was weak." David felt tears burning behind his eyes. "You're the strongest person I know. Dr. Chin helped me see that love isn't weakness. Staying in a relationship that diminishes you is weakness. But loving someone who has genuinely changed and grown? That takes courage." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing the weight of what Amara had just said. "So what happens now?" David asked quietly. "I don't know. We can't just pick up where we left off 3 years ago. Too much has happened, too much has changed. We're different people now. Better people, I hope." "I think so. But if we're going to try again, we have to start over. New relationship, new rules, new understanding of who we are and what we want." David felt hope blooming in his chest like a flower after a long winter. What would starting over look like? It would look like dating. Like getting to know each other again. Like building trust slowly and carefully. Like me keeping my own apartment and my own life while we figure out if we can build something healthy together. I would like that very much. Amara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. "There's one more thing." "What's that?" "Dr. Chin said you've been writing letters to me. Letters you never sent." David felt heat creep up his neck. "She told you that?" "She thought I should know. She said they might help me understand your journey, your growth. Would you be willing to share them with me?" David thought about the dozens of letters sitting in his desk drawer, raw, honest accounts of his therapy sessions, his realizations about their marriage, his slow journey toward becoming a better man. "They're pretty brutal," he warned. "A lot of admitting to things I'm not proud of. I think I need to see that. The brutal honesty. It's the only way we can move forward." That night, David went home and gathered all the letters he had written to Amara over the past year and a half. Some were angry, some were sad, many were filled with regret and self-recrimination. But together they told the story of a man learning to love without possessing, to support without controlling, to let go without giving up. The next evening he met Amara at a quiet cafe in her neighborhood and handed her a thick envelope. "These are in chronological order," he said. "You can read them all at once or take your time. Whatever feels right to you." Amara accepted the envelope with both hands, like she was receiving something precious and fragile. "Will you be patient with me while I process all of this?" she asked. "I'll be as patient as you need me to be. And if I decide that too much damage was done, that we can't make this work, then I'll respect that decision and be grateful for the time we've had to talk like this." Amara studied his face for a long moment, as if she was memorizing it. "You really have changed," she said softly. "So have you. You're more confident, more sure of yourself. It's beautiful to see." 2 weeks later, David was grading papers in his home office when his phone rang. It was Amara. "I finished reading the letters," she said without preamble. David's heart hammered in his chest. And I think we should have dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere we've never been before. Somewhere that's just ours." "Are you sure?" I'm sure that I want to try. I'm sure that the man who wrote those letters is someone I could fall in love with. I'm sure that we both deserve a second chance at happiness. David closed his eyes, feeling gratitude wash over him like a warm tide. I know a place, he said. It's small, quiet, nothing fancy. They have amazing pasta and terrible lighting. Amara laughed and the sound was like music. Sounds perfect. As they finalized their plans, David realized that this was what he had been working toward for the past 2 years. Not getting his old life back but building something entirely new. Something based on mutual respect, genuine communication, and the kind of love that sets people free instead of holding them captive. When he hung up the phone, David looked around his home office, at the pictures of his students, the certificates from his volunteer work, the books on emotional intelligence and healthy relationships that had become his constant companions. This was who he was now. Not the arrogant billionaire who had thought love was about ownership, but a man who had learned that true love was about choice, choosing to grow, choosing to listen, choosing to put someone else's happiness before your own ego. Tomorrow night he would begin the most important journey of his life. Not the journey to win Amara back, but the journey to discover what they could build together as the people they had become. For the first time in 3 years, David Sterling believed in happy endings. The next evening arrived with unseasonable coolness and clear skies. David chose his clothes carefully, not the expensive suits that had once been his armor, but simple jeans and a button-down shirt that Amara had always said brought out his eyes. He arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, securing a quiet table in the back corner. When Amara walked in, his breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a blue dress he had never seen before, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked radiant. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi yourself. You look beautiful." "Thank you. You look nervous." David laughed. "Terrified, actually. It's been a long time since I've been on a first date." "Is that what this is? A first date?" "I hope so. If you'll have me." Amara smiled, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. "I think I will." As they talked through dinner, about her work, his students, the books they were reading, the dreams they were chasing, David marveled at how easy it felt. This was the conversation he had always wanted to have with Amara, the connection he had been too proud and controlling to allow during their marriage. "Can I ask you something?" Amara said as they shared dessert. "Anything. What are you most afraid of? About us trying again?" David considered the question carefully. "I'm afraid that I'll slip back into old patterns without realizing it. That I'll start trying to manage your life instead of just living mine alongside it." "And what are you most hopeful about?" "That we can build something better than what we had before. Something based on who we really are instead of who we thought we should be." Amara nodded slowly. "I'm afraid too. Afraid that I'll lose myself again. But I'm also hopeful that the woman I am now is strong enough to stay herself while still being part of 1Years." They walked slowly back to Amara's apartment, neither of them wanting the evening to end. When they reached her building, David stopped at the bottom of the steps. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "For giving us a chance. Thank you for becoming someone worth giving a chance to." Amara moved closer, and for a moment, David thought she might kiss him. Instead, she placed her hand on his chest, right over his heart. "I can feel how different you are," she said softly. "Your heart isn't racing with the need to control or possess. It's just peaceful. Being with you makes me peaceful. Being with this version of you makes me peaceful too." She stepped back, but her smile was warm and full of promise. "Can I see you again?" David asked. "I'd like that very much." As David walked home through the quiet streets of New York, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. Not the desperate hunger that had driven him to Portland, not the frantic need to fix what was broken, just quiet satisfaction with where he was and who he was becoming. His phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "Thank you for a perfect evening. Sweet dreams." David smiled, typing back, "Thank you for coming back into my life. Sleep well." Then he added one more message: "I love you. Not the way I loved you before, but the way I love you now. Freely, completely, and without condition." Her response came immediately: "I love you too. The real you. The you I always knew you could be." 6 months later, David stood in the art therapy clinic where Amara worked, watching her lead a session with a group of children who had experienced trauma. She was patient, kind, and incredibly skilled at helping these kids express emotions they couldn't put into words. "She's amazing," Dr. Martinez said, appearing beside him. "She really is. You know, when you first started funding our program, I wondered what your connection to Amara was. Now I can see it. You both understand that healing happens when people feel truly seen and valued. David nodded, still watching Amara work with a little girl who hadn't spoken since witnessing domestic violence. Under Amara's gentle guidance, the child was creating a painting full of bright colors and hope. "We're getting married next month," David said quietly. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for both of you. It's going to be small. Just family and close friends. But I wondered if you and some of the kids from both programs might want to come. Amara and I met because of this work, in a way. It seems right to celebrate our new beginning with the people who helped us become who we are now." Dr. Martinez beamed. "We would be honored." The wedding took place in the community garden behind Amara's apartment building. David wore a simple gray suit, and Amara wore a flowing white dress she had chosen herself. Jazz served as David's best woman, and Gloria from the Portland coffee shop flew in to stand with Amara. As they exchanged vows they had written themselves, David looked into Amara's eyes and saw not just love, but partnership, respect, and genuine friendship. "I promise to love you without trying to change you," he said. "To support your dreams even when they take you away from me. To choose you every day not because I need you, but because I want to build a life with the incredible woman you are." Amara's vows brought tears to his eyes. "I promise to love you without losing myself. To build a life with you that has room for both of our dreams. To choose trust over fear, growth over comfort, and us over me, whenever it matters most." When they kissed as husband and wife, David felt like he was finally home, not because he possessed Amara, but because they had chosen to walk through life together as equals, partners, and best friends. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and speeches from the unlikely family they had built together. Jazz's toast brought down the house. "Mr. Sterling taught us that success isn't about getting what you want, it's about becoming someone who deserves what they want. And Mrs. Sterling taught us that sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself. Together, they've taught us that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling that happens to you." As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, David and Amara found themselves alone in the garden, swaying slowly to music that was now just a memory. "Any regrets?" David asked, his arms around his wife. "About what?" "About giving us another chance. About believing I could change." Amara looked up at him, her eyes bright with happiness and certainty. "None at all. The man I married today is everything I always dreamed the man I married 3 years ago could become. And the woman who married you today is strong enough to love you without losing herself." "I love you, Mrs. Sterling." "I love you too, Mr. Sterling." "But David?" "Yeah. I'm keeping my name. Dr. Johnson has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" David laughed, spinning her around in the garden where their new life was just beginning. "Dr. Johnson it is. As long as you'll have me just as I am." "Just as you are," Amara confirmed, "is exactly how I want you." And for the first time in his life, David Sterling understood that the best love stories aren't about conquest or possession. They're about two people choosing to grow together, to support each other's dreams, and to create something beautiful that honors both of their truths. As they danced under the New York stars, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built separately and were now choosing to build together, David knew that this was his real happy ending, not because he had gotten what he wanted, but because he had become someone worthy of the love he had been given. The arrogant billionaire was gone, replaced by a man who understood that the greatest wealth wasn't in his bank account, but in the trust of the woman who had chosen to love him again. And that trust, David knew, was something he would spend the rest of his life proving he deserved.